McGraw-Hill Ascent Audio presents Dealing with People You Can't Stand, 4th edition, How to Bring Out the Best in People at Their Worst, by Rick Brinkman and Rick Kirschner, narrated by Walter Dixon. Preface. Since Dealing with People You Can't Stand was first published in 1994, our world has changed dramatically. Remote work and hybrid work, virtual meetings and video conferencing, social media and other self-profiling systems have all changed how we see each other. As when we first wrote the book, it is our pleasure to present our ideas about having a better and less bitter life. The advice we offer has been put to use by people all over the world in different cultures, doing diverse work and in complex personal environments. Based on the feedback we've received from people and from the book's numerous translations and sales, we can honestly say that the skills and strategies on offer here have stood the test of time. Every generation has its people problems and challenges, some unique to their era and technology, but mostly not. Arrogance, ignorance, selfishness, and stupidity are perennial problems. The problem with people problems is that conflict tends to escalate. The ability to de-escalate conflict is a desirable skill for anyone who wants to make the best of bad situations. The predictability of bad behavior is where this book finds its leverage. A 4th edition provides us an opportunity to refresh, enhance, and share what we've learned across the years. We are inspired by the idea that in these troubled times, we can once again produce something useful to others who want to make a difference in the Peopleverse. We have updated a few things, added a few things, and altered a few things to bring this practical book into today's world. What we didn't change are the tried and true strategies that have proven valuable to many. And this time around, we address the changing landscape of human interaction, including social and antisocial media, family and friends, healing a broken relationship, meetings, and more. This edition includes the missing chapter about the most difficult behavior of all, narcissism. Narcissism is a challenging subject to write about because there's so much that can be said to address the combined challenge of egotism plus trauma. Though it is generally referred to as a personality disorder, our approach is focused on observable behavior. We offer a practical way of thinking about and interacting with people who exhibit this pattern. We leave the heavy analysis to your counselor, therapist, or professor. All bad behavior is, to some degree, narcissistic. Narcissism is an easy label to apply, and you could apply to anyone with whom you have a problem, but it's something to apply only rarely, because many, if not most problems with people can be solved, and you'll never know what you are capable of unless you try. 1st edition, 1994, 2nd edition, 2003, 3rd edition, 2012, now in 27 translations. That was then, this is now. The problem of problem people persists. Continue on to learn how to bring out the best in people at their worst. Dr. Rick Kirschner and Dr. Rick Brinkman. Introduction. People you can't stand. They're those difficult people who are either not doing the things you want them to do or doing the things you do not want them to do, and you don't know what to do about them. Well, you don't have to be their victim anymore. While you can't change difficult people, you can communicate with them in such a way that they change themselves. It's a matter of knowing how to get through to them when they're behaving badly. This book will help you identify and assemble elements of effective communication. In that sense, communication with problem people is similar to making a phone call. You have to dial all the numbers in the correct order if you want to get through. Have just one incorrect number, and your call will not go through. Have all the numbers, but dial them in the wrong order, and your call will not get through. You need all the numbers and in the right order. Communication is equally specific. It is possible to learn the number, dial it correctly, and completely transform your interactions with the people you can't stand. Unfortunately, there will always be a few difficult people who, no matter what you do, refuse to answer the phone and take your call. In those rare instances, you can switch analogies and think of dealing with people you can't stand as making a trip to the communication gym. Difficult people will help you work out your communication muscles and develop your communication stamina. In turn, this may be the very strength you'll need at some later time and place to preserve a more valuable relationship. In this book, we will direct your attention to 7 key areas for solving your people problems. 1. First, we'll examine the forces that compel people to be difficult in such a variety of ways, where one person starts yelling, another shuts down and says nothing, while yet another starts sniping. These fascinating differences are indicators of differing behavioral intentions that have been thwarted. Once you understand these differences, you'll be less inclined to personalize difficult behavior. 2. Then, we'll examine essential communication skills that turn conflict into cooperation, emotion into reason, and hidden agendas into honest dialogue. The good news is that you already use these essential skills in your dealings with people that you get along with. The bad news is that failure to use these skills when dealing with problem people is a big part of the problem. We're going to make the process of communication explicit, so you can begin to use these skills when you most need them, with people at their worst. 3. Next, we'll focus on specific strategies for dealing with the most difficult behaviors of the people you can't stand. You'll learn exactly what you can do to get people to stop whining, attacking, blowing up, and breaking promises. 4. Increasingly, we define our work and relationships with others using devices and technology. From voice-only and text-only communication, to the way we meet with each other, to social media, we hope you will make the most out of the tools we provide to avoid and prevent conflict and build cooperation instead. 5. Problems with family members and friends can be among the hardest to untangle and resolve. We will examine 3 additional types of difficult behavior that tend to occur more in personal relationships than at work, and explore strategies for making gatherings and events less difficult, how to talk about difficult things, and how to repair a relationship that blows up. 6. And we've saved the worst type of difficult behavior for last. The missing chapter in previous editions of this book is a response to one of the most common questions we receive. How do you deal with narcissists? We've added some answers so you can bring out the best in yourself while dealing with them. 7. Toward the end of the book, we address the subject of what to do when you can't stand yourself. By that time, you will probably have recognized yourself in some of the descriptions of problem people. Chapter 36 will help you identify and alter your own difficult behavior. The less difficult you are yourself, the fewer difficult people you'll have to deal with. Before you continue on, allow us to introduce ourselves and tell you how we came to write this book. We're Rick and Rick, best friends, business partners, and naturopathic physicians. We became friends while med students, but our friendship blossomed when a physician and surgeon from an area hospital became our mentor. With his guidance and encouragement, we studied health from an attitudinal point of view. We hoped to determine the principles of mental and emotional health and to find out how these principles might be used to prevent or heal physical illness. Time and again, we found that when people clarify their values, work to fulfill their goals, and learn effective communication and relaxation skills, they feel better. And as their mental and emotional health improves, many of their specific physical symptoms disappear. Since the word doctor means teacher, we began sharing these ideas through seminars and workshops. In 1982, a mental health organization asked us to create a program on how to deal with difficult people. That marked the official beginning of the research project that has culminated in this book, And in the process, we changed the way we define what we do. We now view all our work as a kind of continuing education in people. For more than 4 decades, we've been learning about people's hopes and fears, how people build their lives or destroy them, how people communicate, what makes people difficult, and how best to deal with people at their worst. We've written this book to pass that information along to you. We've presented these ideas to enthusiastic response in seminars and in audio, video, and print to millions of people around the world. It is our hope and belief that the ideas in this book will make a meaningful and lasting difference in the quality of your life. Dr. Rick Kirshner and Dr. Rick Brinkman. Part 1. Getting to know the people you can't stand. We reveal the 10 most unwanted, provide you with the lens of understanding, and show you how the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Chapter 1. The 10 Most Unwanted List. In your repertoire of communication skills, there exist varying degrees of knowledge and ignorance, with their consequent interpersonal strengths and weaknesses. As a result, you may have no trouble at all dealing with that overly emotional or unemotional person whom no one else can stand. You may have more difficulty with people who whine and are negative, or you may find dealing with aggressive people to be the most challenging. Passive people may frustrate you, or you may have a low tolerance for braggarts and blowhards. Likewise, you probably frustrate several people yourself, because everybody is somebody's difficult person, at least some of the time. You may agree or disagree with others about who is a difficult person and who is not. Nevertheless, there is a certain consensus in polite society about who difficult people are and what it is they do that others find difficult. We've identified 10 specific behavior patterns that sane people resort to when they feel threatened or thwarted, which represent their struggle with or withdrawal from undesired circumstances, followed by 3 patterns of bad behavior more likely to be problematic in family and friends. Here are 10 difficult behaviors that represent normal people at their worst, plus 3 that often occur in relations with family and friends. We conclude with the special case of narcissistic behavior. The tank. It was a beautiful day. The sky was clear, and Jim could hear birds singing outside his window. He was moving forward on the project, and the office was humming with activity and teamwork. Suddenly, there was a familiar and inescapable sound. It reminded Jim of the sound of tank treads rumbling down the hallway. It seemed as though the ground actually began to tremble, and Jim could almost hear the distant ping of radar being activated. As Jim listened, Joe, the tank, Bintner, rounded the corner and came into view. Raising his arm like a turret-mounted cannon, he pointed in Jim's direction. Somehow Jim could sense the crosshairs locking onto a target: himself. In desperation, he mentally waved a white flag, but the tank continued moving in his direction. As he stared in shock at the cannon-like finger now pointed at his face, Bintner unleashed a verbal blasting of accusation and scorn. "You're an idiot, a moron. You're completely incompetent and an embarrassment to the human race. You must be a genetic mistake. You've been working on this for 2 weeks, and you're already 3 weeks behind. I won't listen to any more of your excuses. Pay attention, because this is what you are going to do." Out of the corner of his eye, Jim could see that everyone else in the office had either run for cover or was standing frozen, paralyzed with fear. Like the sound of distant thunder, Bintner barked out his orders. Then, as suddenly as it began, the determined assault ended. Bintner was moving off in a new direction, and Jim was left sitting amid the rubble of his best efforts and good intentions. The tank is confrontational, pointed, and angry, the ultimate in pushy and aggressive behavior. The sniper. Sue had never worked harder to prepare a report. This was the big day, and if she could deliver it in a professional and polished manner, there was a good chance she would be rewarded with a promotion. All eyes were on her as she began her presentation. She knew all her numbers would fit into place, and she could sense that victory was just around the corner. Then, as she made her move to the bottom line, there was a stirring, like the rustling of leaves, and she saw a slight movement off to the side of the room. That's when she heard the shot. "Hey," said an insistent, scoffing voice. "That idea of yours reminds me of something I saw in a book. I think it was in Chapter 11. First, a solitary, diabolical laugh filled the room, but then one uneasy chuckle after another joined it. Sue's mind wandered, her concentration broken, the point she was about to make lost. "Huh?" she mumbled awkwardly as she looked around for the source of the disruption. And there, grinning like a Cheshire cat, was the sniper, preparing to take another shot. "Maybe it was Chapter 13? Don't mind me, please, go on. I'm just beginning to understand how little you actually know about this subject." Whether through rude comments, biting sarcasm, or a well-timed roll of the eyes, making you look foolish is the sniper's specialty. The grenade. It had been a good day for getting work done. A pleasant breeze drifted lazily through the window as Monique double-checked the numbers before her. That's when Bob walked into the room, his face a rigid mask, hands balled into fists. Monique could sense that something was wrong, but a second glance at Bob's close-lipped expression prompted her to mind her own business. Bob passed Monique's desk, and as he did, he brushed against a stack of papers perched precariously on the desktop. The papers tumbled to the ground like so many autumn leaves drifting in the breeze. Monique didn't mean to say anything, but in spite of herself, a tiny voice escaped her throat. "Careful there, Bob." In a timeless moment, Bob whirled about, eyes widening, facial muscles twitching, hair standing on end, arms trembling, as his voice exploded. "Why don't you watch where you put that stuff anyway? How the was I supposed to know that was there? I don't know why I even bothered to show up here. Nobody cares what I'm going through. That's the problem with the world today. Nobody gives a—" As the volume of Bob's voice escalated, the breeze seemed to become a violent wind, with scraps of ideas whipping about in a flurry of epithets and emotional shrapnel. It seemed like forever, but at long last Bob's anger began to subside. He stopped yelling, looked around at everyone staring at him, and stormed out the door without another word, slamming the door behind him. A lone sheet of paper drifted lazily to the floor. After a brief period of calm, the grenade explodes into unfocused ranting and raving about things that have nothing to do with the present circumstances. The know-it-all. "Hello, this is XYZ Tech Support. My name is Frank. How may I help you?" Frank answered. The customer began to explain. "My name is Thaddeus Davis. I'm the MIS director at my company, and I've worked with hundreds of devices." Davis went on to describe the problem, concluding, "There is clearly something wrong with your product." "Well, Mr. Davis, I am very familiar with this product. What you have described does not sound to me like it's hardware, but it does sound like a software conflict. Could you tell me which extensions you have loaded?" "It's not a software conflict." "Sir, that's what I am trying to determine. How do you know it isn't a software conflict?" "Are you listening? It is not a software conflict. The problem is with your product." Frank tried another question. "Did it generate a sense key condition? Do you recall what it said?" Davis didn't remember, and he impatiently repeated that the product was at fault. Frank tried again. "Sir, have you tried the drive with another computer?" Davis retorted. "We know it is not a problem with the computer because we can put any other drive on the computer. Let me speak to your supervisor." Seldom in doubt, the know-it-all has a low tolerance for correction and contradiction. If something goes wrong, however, the know-it-all will speak with the same authority about who's to blame. You. The think they know it all. Dina didn't plan on it happening this way. She had the most expertise on the investment committee, and she had poured her heart and soul into the research. She really believed she was finally going to show what she was capable of doing. She forgot to consider the possibility that Leo might interfere. Like a bad dream come true, Leo was dominating the meeting. He was making claims about the performance of various funds that were pure hokum. No one else seemed to realize what he was doing. He had completely taken the group's attention away with the conviction of his communication. And once Leo had the floor, there was no stopping him. "Leo," she pleaded, "those funds are... well, when you look at their track record..." She struggled with the information, not knowing how to stop this before it was too late. "You got a question about that or anything else, just ask," Leo proclaimed without missing a beat, then turned back to his spellbound audience. "I know exactly what we need. Of course, for me, picking the right investments is a piece of cake. Yeah, no sweat. In fact, I kind of enjoy it. That's an ability I have, you know. Plus, I have followed these funds for years. Great track record, trust me." Great track record? From what he was saying, it was obvious to Dina that he knew nothing about those funds. It was equally obvious to her that she had no idea how to stop him. Her heart sank as she looked around the room and watched helplessly as one by one people were swayed by Leo's sureness and enthusiasm. How could they know that he didn't know what he was talking about when Dina was the one who had done the research? Think they know-it-alls can't fool all of the people all of the time, but they can fool some of the people enough of the time, and enough of the people all of the time. All for the sake of getting some attention. The yes person. Alice was just about the nicest person you could ever meet. So nice that she just couldn't say no. So she didn't. Instead, she said yes to everyone and everything, and she sincerely hoped that this would make everybody happy. "Would you do me a favor?" asked Tom. "Sure," Alice would say. "Drop this off for me, would you?" requested Mark. "No problem," was Alice's reply. "Could you remind me to return this call?" begged Ellen. "All right," Alice answered cheerfully. "Finish this up before you leave, okay?" said the boss. "My pleasure," was Alice's immediate response. But more often than not, Alice didn't remind Ellen, didn't do Tom the favor, and didn't drop off Mark's package, and didn't finish the work her boss requested. She could always offer excuses and explanations for failing to do what she said she'd do, and yet, to her surprise, that just wasn't good enough. When promises aren't kept, people get upset, and upset people become confrontational. Mark, Tom, Ellen, and the boss all confronted Alice, each in his or her own way. They assessed her problem and offered solutions, to which Alice always agreed, because she wanted to avoid confrontation at any cost. Still pleasant on the outside, she was soon seething with silent hostility on the inside, and she decided that she had no intention of ever doing what she promised for these nasty people. In an effort to please people and avoid confrontation, yes people say yes without thinking things through. They react to the latest demands on their time by forgetting prior commitments, and they overcommit until they have no time for themselves. Then they become resentful. The maybe person. Marv found himself up against a deadline that required a decision from Angela. Angela knew that the moment of decision was at hand, yet, strangely, she was nowhere to be found. After a prolonged search of every hall and stairwell, he caught up with her at last. "I don't have time to talk, Marv. I'm really sorry." She tried to rush off, but Marv hustled to keep up with her and pressed his case. "So, have you decided who we will be sending to the convention in Hawaii?" asked Marv urgently. "Well, I'm still thinking about it," was Angela's tentative reply. "Still thinking about it?" Marv had to accelerate as Angela was pulling away rapidly. "Angela, the convention is in just 3 weeks. I asked you to choose somebody 6 months ago. This is the biggest event of the year, and we always send our best sales rep. Well, I know, but I guess I'll decide. Marv, breathing rapidly, hustled to keep up. You guess? When? Angela stopped walking. I don't know. Soon. She looked down at the floor absently for a moment, then spun around and headed back the way they'd come. Marv stood there, looking after her, astonished and breathing rapidly. There was no doubt in his mind that this decision would be put off until it was too late to act. In a moment of decision, the maybe person procrastinates in the hope that a better choice will present itself. Sadly, with most decisions, there comes a point when it is too little, too late, and the decision makes itself. The nothing person. If Jay had anything to say for himself, Yin would never know. His ability to sit and stare was unnerving, to say the least. The longer they were married, the less he would say. These days, it seemed to Yin that she did all the talking. There could be worse problems, of course. At least, Jay wasn't a bully, and he never talked unkindly about people. But then again, he hardly ever talked. Maybe a bit of gossip would be an improvement over the sound of silence. Yin thought she'd give it a try. So, Jay, what do you think about the president's work? Jay didn't seem to hear her. He just shrugged and kept reading the paper. Yin tried again. Jay, so, do you like him? The movement of his eyes upward to meet hers was almost imperceptible. Looking into his eyes was like looking into a vacant room. It appeared that nobody was home. I don't know. That's all he said, and then he lowered his eyes in that same nondescript manner and began reading again. Yin couldn't stop herself from pursuing this, now that she had begun it. After all, they had been married for over 17 years. She felt as if the distance between them was miles instead of meters, and that it was her responsibility to build a bridge between them. So she tried again. Jay, it seems like we never talk. You never tell me you love me anymore. Do you still love me? Jay gave her that same look, then slowly turned his head until he was facing the window. He put the paper down and simply said, Nothing is going on. I told you 17 years ago I love you. If something changes, I will let you know. And that was that. He picked up his paper and went back to reading, and Yin's hopes drifted off into the void. No verbal feedback, no nonverbal feedback, nothing. What else could you expect from the nothing person? The no person. Jack had just completed the third quarter of his seminar presentation when a woman in the back raised her hand. Yes, ma'am? You in the back. Do you have a question? She gazed at him through narrowed eyes. That won't work, she said finally. Have you ever tried it? He asked, unsure what they were talking about. What would be the point of trying it if it doesn't work? Whatever it was, it seemed obvious to her. How do you know it doesn't work? He tried again. It's obvious. Obvious to whom? Jack asked. Desperation seized him and wouldn't let go. To any intelligent person capable of thinking it through. Her determination was remarkable. Well, it's not obvious to me, said Jack, believing he had gained the upper hand. Well now, what does that say about you? She replied triumphantly. More deadly to morale than a speeding bullet, more powerful than hope, able to defeat big ideas with a single syllable. Disguised as a mild-mannered, normal person, the no person fights a never-ending battle for futility, hopelessness, and despair. The whiner. Just as Joanne was regaining her concentration, Cynthia began whining again. This was the 112th time she'd been interrupted by Cynthia, and it wasn't even noon. To make
Sample complete. Ready to continue?